Hello everyone, Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to talk about some Ray Dalio advice with respect to sort of global tax planning, global asset protection, global setups that I think is wise for probably anybody who is particularly well off. And I think what you will find is there are a lot of very successful people who are sort of thinking in a similar regard, but I'm going to give some specific nuances around it that will hopefully be helpful to you. So, what we're talking about today is a quote from Dalio, which is, a smart rabbit always has 3 holes, okay? And what is that idea? The idea is that you need essentially 2 backup plans. That's sort of the basic concept of it. And in his particular case, the 3 that he has chosen are UAE, Singapore, the US, okay? Those are kind of the 3 places that he can base things around. So, cool, great, amazing. Should those be yours? I mean, totally depends on your situation. But what's the idea here? The idea is, first of all, not just to focus on 3, okay? So Dalio is famous for kind of being the pioneer of something called risk parity. He runs, for those of you who don't know, the largest hedge fund in the world. And risk parity is all about understanding non-correlation between assets. And the same is true of the places that you're going to go and consider, right? So I could go and I could say, well, you know, let me go have Canada, the US, and UK. 3 holes, right? 3 holes. Not really, right? Because these places are very correlated to each other. Just like you could say, oh, well, let me be in France, Spain, and Italy. They're very correlated to each other. You're probably not really getting the benefits of having different approaches. And so what are the areas that we want to focus on when we're doing this? The first one is banking, right? I always tell people the easiest thing to set up. Maybe you don't want to leave your country. Cool, great, amazing, I understand. Lots of people have a country that they really love living in, and perfect. You should, you know. Lifestyle matters. Being around family, quality of life, all these things matter. So it makes a lot of sense. However, your money doesn't have to be where you are. And you can fairly easily spread that money out between a few different places. Now, when you do that, I've done a bunch of videos in the past talking about international banking. You can go and you can check them out. Most places are either not good quality. So for example, I wouldn't bank anywhere in Africa, just nowhere. I mostly wouldn't bank anywhere in Latin America. You can sort of make some sort of a marginal argument for a few different places, but mostly banking in Latin America, not really good. And this is true of just a lot of the world, right? So you don't want to bank in a bunch of places. Then number 2, a bunch of the places are correlated to each other, so not that great either. Number 3, you can't bank there as a foreigner, okay? So for example, let's just say, this is a terrible example, but say you wanted to be like, okay, cool, let me bank in China. It's non-correlated with the US. Well, the thing is, will they let you, right? Will they let you go and bank in China as a foreigner? And the answer is typically no. So that kind of puts you in a situation where your list of options is quite narrow. So when I explain this to people, I'm like, look, your list of places that are quality, that you can open accounts as a foreigner, and are non-correlated is fairly small. And you're always going to have some degree of correlation, because correlation is not like some magic property. It's based on certain types of risks, right? So the same influences do have an effect on multiple different parts of the world. But when it comes to banking, the places that are kind of worth considering are Switzerland, Singapore, the US, maybe UAE, Korea, Hong Kong, maybe someplace that is kind of British based, so Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Cayman Islands, maybe some of those. You could throw Liechtenstein sort of in the same basket as Switzerland, although generally speaking, I am less of a fan of it. The reason is that they're blacklisted by a bunch of places. So LGT Bank, perfectly decent bank, quite expensive, but perfectly decent bank. However, you're in a situation where you could have negative consequences on the money. So that's something that, one can debate. Obviously, if you're from some other particular area, you may have access to that place as well, right? So say you're from Japan, maybe Japan is on your list. Maybe if you're from Australia, Australia is on your list. But if you're not from one of these places, then you're typically looking at trying to find 2 of these other places. And people will criticize some of these places, right? So for example, they'll say, okay, well, I don't want to be exposed in Korea to the chaebols. all right, like, I think it's questionable how much risk there is there, but the point is you always have risk somewhere. And so the question is, how much are you minimizing that risk? How much can you diversify away from it, et cetera? Okay, so this is a factor. Hong Kong is another great example. Hong Kong is quite nice for being non-correlated to places like the US. However, Hong Kong also has its own set of challenges, right? So my point in this is you're not getting away from, there is no risk-free place. It's not like, oh, magically. The question is, can you have quite low risk, and then can you diversify between non-correlated places that have no low risk, and in aggregate, you have super low risk. That's sort of the idea here, okay? So those are the kind of landscape that you should be thinking about when it comes to banking. If you want help opening in any of those countries, let me know, reach out to us, happy to help you. We help people with doing banking all over the world. Contrary to what some people say, I had a call with someone totally unrelated to this, related to another business anyway, another one of my businesses. And he was kind of saying, oh, you know, foreigners can't get access to US markets. So I was like, this is completely untrue. I can get people in almost anywhere in the world access to US investment markets. It is not a problem. So long as it's not like a sanctioned country or something, you probably can gain access. So anyway, the point is, happy to help you on those sorts of things. Sometimes corporate accounts, sometimes personal accounts, one can look at it. Now, this comes up with the next thing. So you need multiple residencies, okay? Multiple residencies are important because of what we saw during COVID, right? You may not be able to leave your country in some situation unless you have it. So it's good to have backup residencies somewhere. Now, importantly, very, very importantly, the place that you're a resident does not need to be one of the places that you store your money. So the Dalio thing sort of assumes this very like stovepiped, everything is gathered together into one position. It doesn't have to be. Forget about that idea. You do not need to worry about that. You could live in Thailand and you could bank in Singapore. In fact, that's typically what I recommend for people who are living in Thailand, is that they're banking in Singapore, okay? So that's a very viable way to go. It's more difficult to get residency in Singapore. It's quite expensive. A lot of people don't like it as much. Okay, cool, great. Live in Malaysia, live in Thailand, live in the Philippines, one of these places as your place of residency, and benefit from this very favorable banking in Singapore. Okay, so that would be an example. So where are you gonna go? I mean, I've done a lot of it. The banking I can narrow down for you fairly quickly. There's like probably 25 common places that you might go to get a backup residency. And so those places you should, you can kind of investigate based on your own situation. We have a lot of content about it. Again, happy to help you on it, but you should get some sort of a backup residency. If you're wanting to spend part of the year there, which I really encourage, because I think your quality of life is much higher when you have a second base versus just if you have one. But if you aren't going to, then it should be one that is easy to maintain, okay? Something similar goes along for citizenships. Citizenships are more complicated to get. And if you can, it's great to have them. I think it is. If you are a wealthy person, okay, like let's use for example, if you are a decamillionaire and you don't have a second citizenship, I think you're kind of crazy. And the reason is, you should think of it as an insurance. The cost of insurance is quite low as a percentage of your net worth. You can earn that on the value of your money, on interest very quickly. So you should have it. If you don't have it, again, reach out to us, happy to help you, go through all the options, find out which one is best for you. There's no one size fits all. The next thing is legal structures. And this is the thing that I want to kind of emphasize a little bit as being quite important and not exactly the way that a lot of people think. I may have mentioned in the past, I can't recall, this idea of wanting to stovepipe legal structures. What does this mean? It means that the legal structures do not connect with each other, okay? And this was most prominently obvious when there was a whole bunch of people who had trusts in the Caribbean, okay? And the trustees would no longer work with them. And this related to the banks, and there was an issue. And the reason was that there was kind of cross-contamination between the various different elements in that structure. And so you don't want that, okay? What you want is you want to be in a situation where if I have Singapore money and some sort of Singapore structure, it's only we're dealing with Singapore. Now, you might say, well, hang on, Michael, doesn't that contradict what you're saying about residency? No, because here I'm talking about the flow of funds and the legal structure, okay? So that's like an important different thing at play here. The next thing that you might consider is, so you don't want to be transferring money between those things. You want to kind of like isolate it into a single unit and utilize that single unit to put yourself in a situation where if something goes wrong to one, it's insulated from the others. Now, corporate structures are super complicated, okay? So you have to think then about like, what are the controlled foreign companies rules in the country where you are resident? What about management and control rules? You know, if you're talking about trusts, I mean, a good trust is 50 pages, it's custom designed to you. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on there. It's very complex to plan out. And so it is beyond the scope of this. Again, if you're interested in that, reach out to us. Happy to go through. It's a lengthy, in-depth process to make sure it's done properly for you and your situation. So you have to consider tax, you have to consider asset protection, you have to consider inheritance and wealth management and succession planning and banking and on and on and on and on, right? So these things all become very important. But you want to ideally have multiple of these structures, okay? And should you have three? Most people shouldn't. It's too much. It's overkill for them because they're just not at the scale where it makes sense. So the most basic thing is you have something outside of your country. You're in some country, that's your first place. Then you have a second place, you get set up like that. Cool, amazing, awesome, wonderful. You have some sort of a backup which is somehow insulated from what you've got locally. As your wealth grows, if you're in a situation where you're doing very well, I recommend having three. Any more than three, like yes, you can do it, right? There are certain circumstances where it makes sense. But for the most part, you're probably putting yourself in a situation where it's just not, the cost does not justify the effort or the benefit that you're getting out of it. So I hope that's helpful. I think it is a useful thing to consider to have, where possible, three things in each of these areas: banking, residency, citizenship, international structures / wealth. And obviously you can have more. The Dalio thing is, I think, famously like 27 non-correlated assets or something like that. In truth, diversification usually becomes diversification at some point in time, so it's probably not worth it to go that far. But at least to have some in these various areas of your life is a big deal. And hopefully these are kind of some guidelines that will help you. We will look forward to seeing you on the next video.